Good afternoon, everyone. Welcome to Coach Diaz's press conference for Week 3. This Saturday marks the latest chapter in the Miami-Florida State rivalry. UM will host FSU this Saturday night at Hard Rock Stadium at 7:30 p.m. We'll start with an opening statement from Coach Diaz, and then we'll go into questions. Coach?
Thank you, Carter. Before I begin talking about this week, I just, on behalf of our entire football program, I want to extend out our deepest condolences to the Miami High community today. Their head football coach, Corey Smith, passed away. It's been a very difficult year in the South Florida high school coaching community. This is another difficult moment, and we just, again, it was hard news to hear that this morning, and our staff is deeply saddened by that. So, moving on to the game and the week. Obviously, it is FSU week. The team, we came in last night, did our usual Sunday practice routine. The guys are aware of what's going on. They know what this week is about. I think the most encouraging thing I saw last night was a team that was in all three phases not very satisfied with how we played against Louisville. Played hard, played together, played for each other, did a lot of things well, but they realized we can be so much better. And they came out to practice last night with an urgency to improve and get better. So proud of our leadership, proud of the way that went. Obviously, a lot of good things from the game, but it's still just game two. This is still a team that's, getting some of the details right week in, week out. And we know we've got to put together for Saturday night because Miami, Florida State, it doesn't matter what happened the week before. It doesn't matter what the records are. The intensity of that game, the stakes in that game, the unlikely heroes at times that game produces. I think that's why we all love to watch it, and it's certainly an honor to be a part of it. So with that, I'll open up for questions.
Great. Thank you, Coach. We'll start off with Gary Furman from CaneSport. Gary, go ahead.
Hey, Manny, congratulations on the win. Can you talk a little bit about how defense has changed, and more significantly, how measuring success and failure on defense has changed? I mean, the other night we had two teams each put up 500 yards of offense. It really was almost survival out there to a degree. How does a lifelong defensive coordinator like yourself, look at that?
Well, first of all, defense has not changed, right? I mean, it's still, the game still comes down to winning the game, which is played with points and not with yards. So you have to look at what creates points. There's really only two ways you can get points, you think about it. One is through explosive touchdowns, and the second is through red zone scoring. So even if you look at last Saturday's game as an example, the number of explosive plays that both teams had was about the same. 4 of ours turned into touchdowns. None of theirs turned into touchdowns. In the first half, we played excellent red zone defense and held them to 6 points. And again, that's a very talented offense. In the second half, we didn't play well by any metric on defense. So I think you have to look at sometimes yards per play. I think they snapped it maybe 20 more times in the game than we did, or 15. I forget what it was exactly. I think yards per play is always a better metric than total yardage. But all that being said, none of that makes us feel good about the way we played on defense. Watching the film, it was obvious. There was really a couple places where we just didn't execute the way we wanted to. It was one, when you play Louisville, you got to stop the outside zone. Everybody knows it. They know that you know it. They're going to run it whether you think you can or can't. We have in the past have had some success against that scheme by just playing certain techniques with our front, and it just didn't happen. And that was disappointing. Not just that it didn't happen, we did not do a good enough job of correcting it during the course of the game. And I don't think we played our matchups against their tight ends very well one-on-one on the outside in the running game. In the throwing game, they're very similar almost to Georgia Tech back when they were running the triple option. I mean, on every play there's a motion and adjustment, but there's still a read. And whether they're in wide splits in their motioning or they're in their condensed formations, you got to look at the receiver's route combinations. Going to tell you what the route's going to be, and you got to match up on it accordingly. And I thought our secondary, we had our eyes in the backfield too often, which ended up leaving for big cushions because instead of the guys jumping into the routes as we should have. If your eyes are in the backfield, you're not looking at your key of what the route's going to be, and then it creates grass and it creates space. So those are things that are correctable. I mean, when our players saw it, they knew it, and they understood the disappointment. We were getting it explained during the course of the game, but obviously it took us too long to get it right to have the performance that we expect on defense.
Okay, next we'll go to Manny Navarro at The Athletic. Manny, go ahead.
Hey, Manny, two questions related to officiating. So I'm sure you're nervous about this one just because how much the ACC pays attention to this stuff. But the first one, it's the personal foul penalty on Amari. Why do they still consider that, a 15-yard penalty when they review it and it's not, targeting? And I guess what's sort of been the explanation you've heard over the years regarding that? And then the second part is, obviously, there were a lot of holding calls against them that weren't called. Do you send the ACC sort of like a letter or an email? Does Miami do that, like after a game, and say, hey, you guys missed all these calls? What kind of happens with that?
Yeah, so what our league does, and they do a great job of it, they want all the teams after the game to send in the clips of plays that they feel like either the officials missed or called it a different way or whatever. And what they'll do is they'll review all the plays that we send in, and then they'll send us back their reply. They might say, oh, yes, this should have been this. Oh, no, this wasn't that. Oh, here's why we called this a certain way. So that dialogue exists every week. Of course, it's not going to change anything in the game, but it exists every week. In terms of the targeting, is the way that they've layered that rule is that it's unnecessary roughness with targeting.
Okay.
So even though the targeting can come away, the unnecessary roughness sort of does not. We could sit for an hour, Manny, and talk about that, but it's just, look, Amari Carter plays the game the right way. I mean, he just does. And listen, he could have done a lot more damage on that hit if he so chose to. He's trying to put his shoulder away from the guy's head. It's just he's. I mean, if we can remember, you want to talk about Miami, Florida State, you can go back and look at for both teams all the greatest highlights on defense from both teams, and there wouldn't be a player left in the game the way the game was officiated back then. So. I feel badly for Amari because I think he tries to play the game the right way. And I think at times, there's a stigma like, oh man, because when you think about it, getting disqualified for the game in the first half of the next game, that's the second that flag hits the ground, there's a lot going through your mind. So they did the right thing. They reviewed it. That's why the rule's a better rule now than it was a year or two ago. And Amari was able to finish.
Thanks.
Great. Next we'll go to David Lake from 24/7. David, go ahead.
Yeah, Manny, I was wondering if you could share just some of the principles of the Mike Norvell offense. What are some of the things to look out for there? And then if you could provide a status update on Gervin Hall. It seemed like he might have been nicked up in the game. How's he doing?
Yeah, with Gervin first, really all of the guys that were sort of nicked up are still being evaluated through the course of today. Gervin was able to continue playing, sort of after he, whatever he tweaked. So felt good about that. And we just felt like we didn't have to play him there, towards the end of the game. On Mike Norvell offense, I think the one word that comes to my mind is multiplicity. They present a lot of different problems for you defensively. A lot of different schemes in the run game and the throw game. Obviously he and way back when he and Rhett Lashley, are descended from the same coaching family tree. So you can still see at their core what they want to do. But a Mike Norvell offense wants to run the football, and they want to impose their will upon you running it, and then they want to be able to throw play action off of that. And then again, they're going to have a lot of type of deceptive plays. They're going to have some trick plays, to try to spring some things open and catch you with your eyes in the wrong place. So we got to do a lot better job of stopping the run for sure than we did a week ago, and a much better job of eye discipline in the back end than we did a week ago.
Great. Next, we'll go to Tom D'Angelo from the Palm Beach Post. Tom, go ahead.
Hey, Manny, a couple things. First, when you heard about Mike Norvell missing the game this week and being testing positive, he talked about, and I think you guys have been so prepared for anything that happens. What are your preparations for coaches? We've heard a lot about, what you've done for players. If a coach, if yourself had to miss a game, what would you do there? And then I have a follow after that.
Yeah, I mean, and number one, I mean, I feel terribly for Mike, missing this game. And it's look, when we've been talking about this as an ACC, conference calls with all the head coaches all year. I mean, it's just this is what's out there, and this is why every time that test comes back negative, not just for the team, but for all of us on the staff, you don't ever take that for granted, because you just don't know. But in terms of sort of the plan, we do have a organizational chart of if this guy's missing, then this happens. If that guy's missing, then that happens. If I'm missing, then this happens. So that does exist, but those things we'll kind of keep internal, and and we'll only share if we need to share it.
Okay, just one more. What does it mean to a team when you have a kicker like you have now that can do what he does? I mean, just what is it, aside from a guy who can just get you 3 points, what does it mean for the psyche of an offense?
Well, did you see our entire sideline when the kick went in? I mean, it was about as excited as I've ever seen a Miami Hurricanes sideline. Well, it changes everything, right? And I think especially when you compare to not having confidence in that position, where, you know, when you went out there to kick a PAT or a short field goal and it was 50-50. And that doesn't mean that we're going to make them all. But when you have a guy and you know that you don't have to be perfect in the red zone, you don't have to be perfect when you cross midfield. And now all the different options that are available to us, you know, whether we on third down, do we want to go, do we go for the first down? Do we try and get half and go for it on fourth? Do we want to kick from where we're at? It certainly gives us a lot more flexibility of what we want to do once we cross midfield, and it puts more pressure on their defense that every yard is getting us closer to 3 points at least, and ideally 7.
Thank you.
Next, we'll go to Susan Meller-Degnan from the Herald. Susan, go ahead.
Hey, Manny. I guess first, is there an update on Isaiah Walker? Just based on some of his Twitter activity this morning, it seemed like maybe he got some good news. And also, I'm just curious about, I know the Ed Reed role is probably one that's still constantly evolving, but he's been on the sideline for both games now. Curious, is he a guy who can come tap you on the shoulder at some point during the game? Is it something where you talk to him on the plane home, talk to him after practice on Sunday? Just what's kind of his role become so far early this season?
No, he's been so valuable. Yes, I mean, during the game, between series, I'll come find him. Just from his vantage point, his perspective, the things that he can see, amongst our team, that when you're coaching, you're so into what's going on in the field that you miss. And it could be where players are standing on the sideline. It could be a conversation that he had with a certain player. It could be him talking about a player and how he's dealing with something when something doesn't go well, and his ability to get a guy, help a guy bounce back through that. So all those type of things, I think Ed has really done a nice job of during the game. And I guess helping with the officiating too is what it sounds like. And so no, there's certainly after the game, there's great value in this building, but a lot of times what he can provide in the course of the game has been really good for us as well. The first part of the question with Isaiah, there's no big status update difference. I think he's just happy to be here.
Next up, we'll go back to Susan Miller. Susan, go ahead.
Hey, Manny. I'm just extending kind of what Tom D'Angelo asked you. With Chris Thompson now, the interim coach, while Norvell is isolated, do you expect that to affect at all the overall game itself or the planning? And I did have a follow also.
Well, I mean, in terms of the head coach responsibilities, I think only they would know that. I would think the bigger key is actually the play calling. Because they don't just lose their head coach; they lose their offensive play caller. So I think a little bit of a different dynamic of that. That's something that will be an unknown. It may be an unknown for them. You just got to get in the game and really see, are some tendencies different? Is it all the same thing? You really don't know until you get in there and find out.
And also, the players from both teams know each other so well in this game. Do you tell them to kind of lie low and not to go back and forth with the guys they know in FSU, or do you try not to deal with those types of things at all?
You mean before the game?
Yeah, exactly. This week.
Yeah, we'd rather our guys just be worried about what's going on inside this building, and they'll have plenty of a chance to express themselves, once the ball kicks off Saturday night after 7:30. So, yeah, I mean that's. No one needs more motivation to win Miami, Florida State than what the event already provides.
Okay, thank you.
Next, we'll go to David Furones with the Sun Sentinel. David, go ahead.
Hi, Manny. The players that were unavailable ahead of the game against Louisville, Jeremiah Payton, Larry Hodges, are they still expected to be unavailable for this week and then going into the bye? And then also Tate Martell, we saw he opted out of the season. Do you anticipate he will want to come back to the Miami Hurricanes following this season?
We told Tate we just revisit it after the season. We'll kind of see where everything's at. And then in terms of the inactive list, we'll just have to see how the week goes, but we definitely have a chance of getting some guys back that were on that list.
Okay, we got time for a couple more. We'll go to Chris Stock next. Chris, go ahead.
Yeah, Manny, with 2 games in now with De'Aaron King, just seeing him play and actually in games, just kind of your impressions of him. Is there things that are standing out to him from actual gameplay? And then also the impact that Quincy and Jalen are making at defensive end through 2 games?
I think, I think everybody that's watching the game can see the things that Derek can do on the field. And we saw his running ability in game 1 and really his throwing ability in game 2. For me, but the biggest thing is just the confidence he gives us on offense. To me, that entire game on Saturday, the key moment for sure was when we hit the long pass to Will Mallory. Will makes a great play, breaks a tackle. It's like a 70-some-odd yard gain. We get called for a false start on our guy barely flinches. It's something that happens probably 7 or 8 times a game and is not called, but this one's called, and we earned it. You're backed up inside the 10-yard line. You got 3rd down and 14, and if you don't believe in your guy and the team doesn't believe in your guy, how many times you've seen the offense just hand the ball off their punt, go play defense and give Louisville the ball in a short field. And offensive line does a great job, but Derek gets back and just rips one out there to Pope to the field, the longest throw you can make, and then bang, and we get going and on that drive, and we end up scoring on that drive, and I think that made it 14-3, and even though there was still some back and forth, really from that point on, we were in control of the game. So I just think the confidence of a guy like that and where that puts everybody on offense in a situation where there would normally be a big downer after a 70-some-odd yard gain wiped out because of a flinch. Everybody's like, hey, put the ball down, let's go play the next play. And I think that's really the encouraging part, as well as coming here the next day and saying, man, that's not nearly as good as we can play. We only had 5 players on offense and 5 players on defense that we felt like graded out as a champion. So a lot of guys we feel like can play with a much greater attention to detail. They're playing hard and they're playing for each other, but our attention to detail can really, really go up, and the players see how much better we can be. It was fun to watch an offense be disappointed in scoring 47 points, but that was really the mood in the building here yesterday. In terms of Jalen and Quincy, obviously both guys can make plays, they can flash. I thought Jalen was really physical at the point of attack, and again, really was, drawing a lot of attention from Louisville's offensive line. Quincy made another flash play. We do need to be – defensive end is such a unique position now with all the read game stuff, and you have to really almost play it like an outside linebacker at times. And we have to get better at not just those 2, but the 2 young ones behind, of understanding how to play all the techniques versus the QB run game. I would say we were poor at that on Saturday night. So we know those guys can make plays, but sometimes attention to detail. And again, when you're learning a new system and we've got some inexperienced players, that's part of our development that we'll have this year as a defense.
For the last question, we'll go to Andrea Adelson from ESPN. Andrea, go ahead.
Manny, a lot of people were using the dreaded B word after the game, and that comes when you're at Miami and people think you're back when you have a big road win against a ranked opponent, and I don't think anyone there is ready to declare Miami back. But is there a way you can measure the progress that you guys have made? I know it's only a short period of time at the start of this season, maybe compared to where you were at the end of last year.
Yeah, I mean, I'm with you. You know how silly that is, but we do know that, we live in that world, right? With polarizing views, we're the worst or the best, and there's usually not much in between. What we just talk about is what's real. Look, it doesn't matter. We have another game. We got to go beat Florida State. Our guys, felt. I do know this. We about played the same game against Louisville a year ago. If you think about it, scored a bunch of points and kind of gave more points than we really were happy with. I didn't sense the same aftermath. Our players were very excited in the locker room. It's hard to win on the road, and they really enjoyed the process of victory. But when they came back in here the next day, I don't think there was the contentment that maybe we felt a year ago. And so I do think there's a maturity level that our team, some older guys, different personalities, different mindset that could ultimately make us different. But we're 120 minutes into this deal, and I'm not going to run up a hill and put a flag in the ground saying, hey, this is who we are now. That is all still to be determined. But I do like the spirit that this team plays with early on.
Thanks, Manny.
Great. Thank you, Coach. Thank you, everybody. Just a reminder, the Rhett Lashley Zoom press conference will begin at 1:30. That is a separate Zoom link followed by Blake Baker. And we will see all of you later this week. Thank you.